What if the school bully targeted the wrong girl, one whose ties ran so deep into the very fabric of existence, it threatened to unravel everything he knew? This atmospheric tale follows Elara Vance, a new and enigmatic student who unexpectedly becomes the focus of Damon Blackwood, the seemingly untouchable ruler of Northwood Academy. He perceives her as fragile, an easy mark in the rigid social hierarchy, unaware that Elara carries a secret, an ancient and potent connection that will turn his world upside down in the most unforeseen ways. Stay until the end. Because what begins with a bully's arrogant presumption will culminate in his profound undoing. The biting wind whipped through the skeletal branches of the ancient oaks surrounding Northwood Academy, a prestigious boarding school nestled deep within the shadowed valleys of upstate New York. Elara Vance, a girl as ethereal and quiet as the falling snow, clutched the worn leather satchel containing her few belongings. The imposing stone gates, etched with the school's formidable crest, a rampant griffin, seemed to exhale an air of cold authority, a stark contrast to the sun-drenched Californian shores she had reluctantly left behind. This was her third school in as many years, each move a reluctant consequence of her mother's increasingly erratic artistic pursuits, chasing fleeting muses across the country like phantom butterflies. Elara had learned to adapt, to become a chameleon, blending into the background, a silent observer in the ever-shifting landscapes of teenage social hierarchies. Her goal, as always, was simple: survive unnoticed. Northwood, however, felt different. The air itself seemed thick with tradition, with the unspoken weight of generations of privilege and expectation. The students, clad in their impeccably tailored uniforms of navy and gray, moved with an air of ingrained confidence, their laughter echoing through the hallowed halls like the calls of exotic birds in a foreign land. Elara felt like a misplaced shadow, a smudge of charcoal on a pristine canvas. She navigated the labyrinthine corridors, her gaze fixed on the polished wooden floors, clutching the crumpled map of the school like a lifeline. Lockers slammed with a resounding clang, the rhythmic squeak of sneakers against the marble floors, a constant undercurrent to the murmur of conversations. As she searched for the headmistress's office, a figure emerged from the throng, a presence that seemed to physically displace the surrounding air. This was Damon Blackwood. Tall and powerfully built, with the sculpted features of a Roman statue and eyes the color of a stormy sea, he exuded an aura of effortless dominance. He was surrounded by a coterie of equally privileged boys, their expensive loafers tapping in unison, their laughter booming like distant thunder. Damon was the undisputed apex predator of Northwood's ecosystem, captain of the lacrosse team, heir to a vast industrial fortune, and possessor of a charisma that could charm the most jaded teacher and intimidate the most defiant student. Elara had encountered his type before, the golden boy, the entitled prince who held court in the gilded cage of his own making. She instinctively lowered her gaze, hoping to become invisible, a trick she had perfected over years of navigating new and often hostile territories. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony. As she rounded a corner, a sudden jostle from a passing student sent her satchel tumbling from her grasp, its contents spilling across the gleaming floor. A worn copy of Wuthering Heights, a sketchbook filled with intricate charcoal drawings, a half-eaten apple, and a small, intricately carved wooden bird. A ripple of amusement spread through the nearby students, their eyes drawn to the unexpected disruption. "Well, well, what have we here?" The voice was like smooth velvet laced with steel. "Damon Blackwood." Elara froze, her cheeks burning with a familiar flush of humiliation. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The subtle shift in the atmosphere, the almost imperceptible tightening in the posture of the surrounding students, all pointed to his presence. She knelt quickly, her fingers fumbling as she gathered her scattered belongings, desperate to disappear back into the anonymity she craved. "Lost something, little sparrow?" Damon's voice was laced with amusement, his shadow falling over her like a predatory bird. His friends chuckled, a chorus of sycophantic agreement. Slowly, Elara stood, clutching her satchel to her chest. She avoided his gaze, attempting to sidestep him and continue on her way. But Damon wasn't finished. "New around here, aren't you?" he drawled, his voice carrying through the sudden hush that had fallen over the hallway. "Don't think I've seen that unique style before." His eyes lingered on her simple, unfashionable dress. Elara remained silent, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had learned that engaging with bullies only fueled their fire. The best defense was to become a ghost, a non-entity, but Damon seemed determined to draw her into his orbit. He reached out a hand, not quite touching her, but close enough to make her flinch. "Cat got your tongue?" He smirked, his eyes glinting with a predatory light. His friends snickered again, their eyes fixed on Elara, waiting for her reaction. That's when she felt it, a subtle shift in the air, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck. It was a feeling she had learned to trust, an instinct honed by years of living on the fringes. It was the awareness of a presence, something ancient and powerful, a silent guardian that had always been just beyond the veil of her perception. Slowly, Elara met Damon's gaze. Her own eyes, usually downcast and shy, held a sudden, unexpected intensity. There was no fear in them, only a quiet steadiness that seemed to momentarily unsettle Damon. "You shouldn't," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper, yet carrying a strange resonance that cut through the surrounding silence. Damon raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his features. Then he let out a short, dismissive laugh. "And why not, little sparrow?" he mocked, his confidence seemingly unshaken. Elara didn't answer. She simply held his gaze, her silence more potent than any words. The prickling sensation intensified, and for a fleeting moment, Damon's smirk wavered, a shadow of unease passing across his eyes. "You're a strange one," he said, his voice losing some of its playful edge. A few hesitant chuckles came from his friends. Elara turned and walked away, leaving behind a stunned silence. She didn't look back, but she could feel Damon's gaze burning into her back. He had no idea the intricate web he was about to stumble into. The rest of the day passed in a blur of unfamiliar faces and daunting hallways. Elara kept to the edges of classrooms, her answers to teachers' questions concise and barely audible. She ate lunch alone in the echoing vastness of the dining hall, finding a secluded corner table where she could observe without being observed. Damon and his entourage held court at the central table, their laughter and boisterous conversations dominating the room. Occasionally, Elara would feel Damon's eyes flick towards her, a curious, almost calculating look in their depths. But he didn't approach. Not yet. As the final bell rang, Elara felt a wave of relief wash over her. The crisp autumn air felt like a breath of fresh air as she walked towards the ancient wrought iron gates that marked the school's boundary. Just as she reached the edge of the property, a familiar voice echoed behind her. "Hey, new girl." She turned. Damon stood a few yards away, his hands shoved casually into the pockets of his impeccably tailored trousers, a half-smile playing on his lips. His usual retinue of followers lingered a respectful distance behind him. "What do you want?" Elara asked, her voice flat. Damon took a slow step closer, his eyes assessing her with an almost clinical detachment. "You've got an attitude problem, you know that?" Elara didn't respond. Damon's smile widened, a hint of something sharper glinting in his eyes. "What? You think you're better than us?" A small, involuntary laugh escaped Elara's lips. Not nervous, not scared, but a genuine expression of amusement at his misplaced arrogance. It was the last reaction Damon had expected. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "I think," Elara said slowly, her gaze unwavering, "that you should walk away." Damon took another step closer, his superior height casting a long shadow over her. "Oh yeah? And why is that?" Elara leaned in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying an undeniable weight. "Because you have no idea who I am." Damon chuckled, shaking his head. "And who are you exactly? Some kind of rebellious heiress hiding out?" Elara didn't answer. Instead, she took a step back, her hand reaching into her satchel. She pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden flute, its surface smooth and cool beneath her fingers. She raised it to her lips and began to play. The sound that emerged was unlike anything Damon or his friends had ever heard. It wasn't a melody in the traditional sense, but a series of haunting, resonant notes that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. The wind picked up, swirling the fallen leaves at their feet into a miniature vortex. The ancient oaks surrounding the school seemed to rustle in response, their branches swaying in an unnatural rhythm. Damon and his friends stood frozen, an unsettling feeling creeping into their bravado. The sky, which had been a clear, pale blue moments before, began to darken, the clouds gathering with an unnatural speed. A low growl, like the rumbling of distant thunder, echoed through the valley, yet there wasn't a storm in sight. Elara lowered the flute, the last note fading into the increasingly charged atmosphere. The air crackled with an unseen energy. She looked at Damon, her eyes now holding a depth and ancient wisdom that belied her youthful appearance. "Still think I'm just some random girl?" she asked softly. Damon didn't answer. His face, moments before filled with arrogant amusement, was now pale and etched with a dawning unease. He looked around at the swirling leaves, the darkening sky, the ancient trees that seemed to lean in as if listening. For the first time in his privileged life, Damon Blackwood felt a flicker of genuine fear. Elara watched as Damon's confident smirk dissolved, replaced by a look of bewildered apprehension. His jaw tightened, his eyes darting between her and the surrounding environment, as if searching for a logical explanation for the unsettling shift in the atmosphere. The playful arrogance that had defined his posture now seemed brittle, on the verge of shattering. He took an involuntary step back, his friends behind him shifting nervously, their usual chorus of laughter silenced by a palpable sense of unease. Elara, in contrast, seemed to grow in stature, her quiet demeanor replaced by an almost regal stillness. She adjusted the strap of her satchel, her movements deliberate and unhurried. as if she were completely unfazed by the strange occurrences around them. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a faint, earthy scent, and the low growl in the distance seemed to deepen, resonating in their very bones. Damon swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. "What? What was that?" he stammered, his voice losing its usual confident timbre. He looked at Elara again, his eyes now filled with a mixture of confusion and a dawning, unsettling realization. He was beginning to understand that there was something profoundly different about this quiet new girl. Elara simply smiled, a faint, enigmatic curve of her lips that offered no explanation. She raised the wooden flute slightly, a silent promise of powers unseen and unknown. Damon's mouth opened and closed, as if he wanted to say something, to regain control of the situation, but the words seemed to have deserted him. Then a shadow fell over them. Not the shadow of a cloud, but something darker, something immense. A collective gasp escaped Damon and his friends as they looked up. Circling high above the ancient oaks, its wings casting a vast, ominous silhouette against the darkening sky, was a creature of myth and legend. Its feathers were the color of midnight, its eyes glowed with an inner fire, and its powerful talons seemed capable of tearing through steel. It was a raven, but larger than any raven they had ever seen, its presence radiating an ancient, untamed power. The colossal raven let out a piercing cry that echoed through the valley, a sound that seemed to vibrate with the very essence of the wild. It circled once more, its gaze seemingly fixed on Damon, before swooping down towards Elara. Damon and his friends instinctively flinched, bracing for an attack, but the raven landed gently on Elara's outstretched arm, its sharp talons surprisingly delicate against her skin. Elara stroked its glossy feathers, a look of quiet understanding passing between them. She turned back to Damon, the enigmatic smile still playing on her lips. "Still think I'm just some random girl?" she repeated softly, the presence of the magnificent creature on her arm amplifying the weight of her words. Damon didn't answer. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with disbelief and a primal fear that had never before touched his privileged existence. He had no explanation for what he was seeing, no framework within his sheltered world to comprehend the power that now stood before him. For the first time in his life, Damon Blackwood was utterly and completely speechless. Elara watched as the color drained from Damon's face. His carefully constructed facade of confidence had crumbled, revealing the vulnerability beneath. His friends stood behind him, their bravado completely evaporated, their eyes fixed on the immense raven perched calmly on Elara's arm. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the occasional soft coo of the giant bird. Elara took her time, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. She continued to stroke the raven's feathers, her touch gentle and assured. The creature seemed to preen under her attention, its intelligent eyes occasionally flicking towards Damon with an almost knowing gaze. Damon finally found his voice, but it was a mere whisper, laced with a tremor he couldn't control. "What is that?" he asked, his eyes still fixed on the raven. Elara's enigmatic smile widened slightly. "This," she said, her voice calm and steady, "is Corvus." Corvus let out a soft, rumbling call, as if acknowledging his name. The sound sent a shiver down Damon's spine. He looked from the magnificent creature to Elara, his mind racing to comprehend the impossible. He had always believed that he understood the world, that his wealth and status placed him at the top of its hierarchy, but this was something beyond his comprehension, something that existed outside the carefully constructed rules of Northwood Academy. Elara shifted her gaze back to Damon, her eyes now holding a hint of something akin to pity. "You see, Damon," she said softly, "some connections run deeper than you can imagine. Some powers are not measured in wealth or popularity." Damon remained silent, his mind reeling. He had underestimated this new girl, dismissed her as an easy target. He had been so blinded by his own arrogance that he had failed to see the quiet strength that resided within her, the ancient connection that flowed through her veins. Elara gave Corvus a final, affectionate stroke. The giant raven spread its immense wings, the span easily dwarfing Elara's small frame, and with a powerful beat, launched itself into the darkening sky. It circled once more above them, its piercing cry echoing through the valley before disappearing into the gathering twilight. The sudden absence of the creature seemed to leave a void in the air, yet the unsettling feeling of unseen power lingered. Elara turned back to Damon, who was still staring at the sky, his face pale and drawn. "I suggest you remember this, Damon," Elara said, her voice quiet but firm. "Some shadows hold more power than the brightest light." She then turned and walked away, leaving Damon and his stunned friends standing in the fading light, the image of the colossal raven etched into their minds. For the first time, Damon Blackwood understood that he had picked on the wrong shadow. He had no idea the intricate and ancient world he had inadvertently stumbled into, a world where whispers carried more weight than shouts, and where the quietest souls often held the most formidable connections. His reign at Northwood Academy had just encountered a force he could neither bully nor control. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted, and Damon, the once unchallenged king, now stood on shaky ground, the unsettling echo of a raven's cry ringing in his ears.